Okay. Right at the beginning of writing this album, I hit up my buddies Scott and Joel Owen, who are in this sick band called Pawn Shop Kings, these two brothers. I was like, hey, let's write together. And they're like this kind of bluegrass, folky, southern soul band. And I was like, hey, let's do this. I think we could write something sick. And as Scott was walking out of his house, he like just sat down real quick at the piano right before he drove up to here at my studio in Ventura, and he sang this melody or this lyric that was just there will come a day. And then he was kind of like just mumbling some other words and humming a melody, and he sent me a little iPhone message and was like, hey dude, what about you? What about something like this? And it sounded like something like that I had written or I would write, and which I was just shocked because he's this bluegrass guy, this folk guy, and I was like, dude, that's freaking sick. We need to write that. And the Boston Marathon had just happened, and that bomb had went off.
The moment captured from multiple angles.
In Brazil, there had been this club where there was a fire, and the security guards wouldn't let anybody out of the club because they hadn't paid their bar tabs yet, and so all these people died. And my daughter's best friend had just died the year before from cancer. She was 8 years old, and she had been battling for cancer for 3 years. And it was just like, dang it, man, like the world, it wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to be this dramatic and this much pain and this much suffering, and someday it's not going to be like this. Someday there's going to come a day and it won't be like this anymore. And so we wrote this song that we really loved, and what I didn't realize was that a few months later this song would become like really personal and really special to me, because a few months later I found out my wife was pregnant, and a couple weeks in we went to the doctor and had an ultrasound, and everything looked perfect in the body, with the body. And then we got to the head, and the nurse got real scared, and she called in the doctor, and everybody was nervous. And then they finally told us that our baby has this birth defect called anencephaly, which means the baby's top of the skull never developed, and so the brain didn't develop properly, and it's a birth defect that's incompatible with life. And so the baby would survive, but he would be born and he would immediately go back to his creator. He might live for a minute or a couple of days, but he can't survive. And obviously, our hearts were broken. We were pretty destroyed. We sat there and wept. And one time, there's a story about Jesus having a friend who died, and it says that he wept. It's like this convulsing kind of weeping. And I don't know that he wept because his friend died. I think he wept because he knew that death wasn't the plan. It wasn't the way it was supposed to be. And so, in January we'll have this little boy, and he'll be beautiful, and he'll be born, and then we'll say goodbye to him, and we won't bring a car seat to the hospital, and we won't decorate a room, and this time around there'll be no baby shower, and there'll be no clothes, that come from my aunties or from my parents, saying like it's a boy, or like cute little blue onesies or whatever. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. But there's coming a day when the enemy of death will be defeated, and the enemy of sickness and disease that was not intended to be will someday be done, and there shall be no more death, and there will be no more suffering, and all things will be made right. And I'm longing for that day more than ever now, you know. I long for that day. Come that day.